"Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass again." The words came clipped, wrapped in a thin veneer of politeness, but the dismissive tone cut deeper than steel. Rebecca Warren, the flight attendant, didn't just ask. She appraised, eyes narrowing as she scanned the paper like it carried a lie. "Your boarding pass has to be confirmed before you're allowed to board," she continued, voice dipping lower. "So you can't board this plane yet. Step aside for others to board." Elise Washington, black, poised, and unshakable, extended the pass again. Her fingers were steady, but somewhere deep inside, a storm churned. "There's no mistake," she said, voice calm, almost measured. "I'm in seat 2A. The air between them tightened. Behind her, the boarding line inched forward, passengers pretending not to listen but catching every syllable. Some faces showed quiet concern. Others reflected the satisfaction of a social order being upheld. Then the security guard arrived. No greeting, no question. His hand closed around Elise's arm, firm, insistent. The fabric of her simple black suit jacket bunched under his fingers. She tried to explain, but her words drowned in the bustle. Without ceremony, he began steering her away from the gate. The crowd responded in a silent spectrum, a raised brow here, averted eyes there, even a few nods of approval. That old, familiar dance. And then, in less than half a minute, everything changed. The massive departure screens overhead flickered, then went black. Boarding gate displays froze mid-update. A cheery PA announcement about on-time departure sputtered, cut off in mid-sentence. The terminal's heartbeat, digital and constant, fell silent. Confusion bloomed like wildfire. Boarding stopped cold. Passengers milled in the aisles, luggage askew. Gate agents tapped uselessly at their dead keyboards. Gate 37B had been loud before. Now it was chaos. Shouts overlapped. Cell phones came out. Airline staff scrambled, but no one could bring the system back to life. This wasn't a delay. This was something else. Because this was no ordinary passenger's inconvenience. This was Elise Washington's storm breaking. The same Elise Washington whose name was known in boardrooms from San Francisco to Singapore. The woman who had built an empire from nothing but a second-hand computer and a stubborn refusal to quit. She had no trust fund, no famous mentor. Her mother worked 3 jobs to keep a leaky roof over their heads. While other teens lingered at the mall, Elise was in the back of a pawn shop, soldering broken circuit boards, coaxing life into discarded machines. By 17, she was repairing enough computers for local businesses to help pay the rent. Even then, the road was uphill. Perfect SAT scores got her waitlisted at every top tech school. When she finally made it into Northwestern on a partial scholarship, she worked 2 jobs while carrying a full course load. In her first tech role, she watched less experienced white male colleagues get promoted above her. When she built an algorithm that saved her company millions, her manager took the credit and labeled her difficult when she objected. But Elise Washington didn't break. She built. At 28, she mortgaged everything she owned to start Nexus Technologies. The first office was her cramped studio apartment. Her first staff, 3 equally hungry graduates, worked for equity because she couldn't pay salaries. 15 years later, Nexus employed over 5,000 people and reported $1.2 billion in annual profits. Elise wasn't just a CEO. She was a force of nature. That morning, she had been preparing for the most important deal of her career, a keynote at the Global Tech Innovation Summit in Singapore. The deal was set to bring in a $500 million investment from the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund, the kind of deal that would double her company's reach and finance its most ambitious project yet. She traveled alone, always had. For her, long flights were time to think, to sharpen strategy. She wore no flashy jewelry, no corporate entourage. Just black trousers, a silk blouse, and a tailored blazer. Her one indulgence, a pair of handcrafted leather loafers that fit like they were made for her stride. She had no idea her path that morning would collide with Bradley Winters, the 68-year-old CEO of Sky Globe Airlines, a man who had inherited an empire and steered it toward the rocks. His father had expanded the airline. His grandfather had built it in the golden age of air travel. Bradley liked to call himself a steward of tradition. But the tradition he guarded was not excellence, it was exclusion. And now, one of his employees had just told Elise Washington to step aside. Her carry-on rolled smoothly behind her as she stepped into LaGuardia's Terminal B, the kind of morning that should have been routine. But for Elise Washington, the day would unfold as something else entirely. The first cut came before she even reached the counter. She had flown first class more times than she could count, yet as she approached the premium check-in, that soft-carpeted enclave reserved for the airline's most valuable customers, A gate agent stepped into her path. "Economy check-in is that way, ma'am?" The gesture was casual, dismissive. The tone made it clear. This wasn't a suggestion. Elise paused, inhaled slowly, and replied with practiced calm. "I'm flying first class. To Singapore." She held out her phone, her boarding pass glowing on the screen. The agent barely glanced at it. "Economy check-in is that way," she repeated, sharper this time. It was a small moment, the kind most white travelers would never even notice. But Elise had felt these moments 1,000 times. They didn't bruise skin, but they left scars. She didn't argue. She simply walked past the agent to the premium counter, where another representative processed her check-in, not without a double take and not without the faint, lingering shadow of surprise. Her suitcase checked, Elise moved toward security with only her briefcase and designer carry-on. The premium lane was nearly empty, one of the quiet luxuries that made first class worth its price. But as she approached, a TSA agent stepped forward. "Random security check, ma'am. You'll need to go through enhanced screening." She watched 3 white businessmen breeze through the premium lane without so much as a nod from the same agent. She glanced at the random selection in the enhanced line. Every single person was a person of color. When it was her turn, the pat-down went beyond thorough. The male agent's hands lingered, doubling back over the same areas. His touch was firmer than necessary, deliberate in its unnecessariness. The humiliation flared hot under her skin, but Elise kept her face still. She had learned long ago that any hint of anger would be weaponized against her. Then came the second cut. Her watch, gone. Not just any watch, but a custom Patek Philippe worth $60,000. A gift to herself when Nexus Technologies went public. It wasn't merely an accessory, it was a monument to survival. "I placed it in the bin myself," she told the agent. His reply was a shrug, his eyes already somewhere else. It took 15 minutes of firm insistence, the threat of legal counsel, and the arrival of a supervisor before her watch appeared in a bin she had never used. By the time she reached gate 37B, boarding had already begun. But she still had time, and first-class passengers could board whenever they pleased. She stepped into the first-class lane. The gate agent's name tag read Meredith. The suspicion in her eyes was instant. "This lane is for our first-class passengers only." "I'm aware," Elise said evenly, showing her pass. "Seat 2A." Meredith took it, examined it as though it were forged in some back alley, then picked up a phone. Her voice dropped to a whisper, her eyes darting back to Elise. Soon a supervisor approached, late 50s, hard lines etched deep into his face. "Richard Bronson, customer service supervisor." "Is there a problem?" he asked Meredith, not Elise. "She says she has a first-class ticket," Meredith replied, stressing says just enough to make it a question. Richard took the pass, his gaze drifting over Elise. The silk blouse, tailored blazer, handcrafted loafers. "Ma'am, are you aware that first-class tickets on international flights are very expensive?" The implication hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. Somewhere behind her, someone snickered. "We'll need to verify your ticket," Richard said finally. "There seems to be some kind of irregularity." "What irregularity?" Elise asked. "Passport. Credit card used for purchase. Company authorization for the expenditure." It wasn't procedure. It wasn't policy. It was performance, the kind that turned bias into bureaucracy. Phones were out now. Passengers recorded. A white-haired woman nearby muttered, "Just show your papers if you have nothing to hide." Elise handed over her passport and corporate card but refused the authorization demand. That document didn't exist for any passenger. "Step aside while we verify," Richard said. "Boarding needs to continue." And so she was led away as other first-class passengers sailed through with nothing more than a casual beep of the scanner. Those few minutes of verification stretched on. The gate, and her patience, hung in the balance. 20 minutes became 40. 40 became over an hour. Elise sat at the customer service desk watching the seconds tick away on her newly recovered watch. No updates. No explanations. Only the same dismissive refrain when she asked, "We're working on it." From her seat, she could see everything. The boarding lane, the final calls, the slow closing of the jet bridge door. She could also see the huddle of Sky Globe employees at a nearby counter, their furtive glances in her direction, the laughter they tried and failed to hide in the airport's echoing acoustics. Thinks she belongs in first class. Probably her first time on a plane. Bet she won't be so bold when she misses her flight. Each word was a tiny blade. But the deepest cut came when her flight, the one she had every right to board in a seat she had paid thousands for, began to taxi away without her. Only then did Richard return. His expression was professional in the way only practiced indifference can be. "I regret to inform you that while we were verifying your information, your flight has departed," he said, the regret purely decorative. "I missed my boarding time because your staff deliberately detained me on false pretenses," Elise replied, her voice steady. He ignored that entirely. "We can rebook you on the next flight to Singapore in approximately 5 hours. Unfortunately, first class is fully booked. We can offer you an economy seat." The insult was almost elegant in its efficiency. Deny her the seat she paid for, keep the fare difference, and expect her to swallow the humiliation. "Show me the booking system," Elise said. "I'm not authorized." "Show me the system," she repeated, rising from her chair, "or my company's legal team will check every record for this flight." Something in her tone must have unsettled him, because to her surprise, Richard turned the monitor. Whether he assumed she wouldn't understand what she was looking at or simply panicked, she couldn't tell. But there it was, 3 open seats in first class on the next flight. "You're lying to me," Elise said flatly. Richard quickly turned the screen away. "Those are blocked for operational reasons." "What operational reasons?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss." "Discriminatory reasons," she said, her voice rising just enough to carry. "You prevented me from boarding my original flight, and now you're lying to keep me out of first class on the next one." A small crowd had gathered. Phones were up. The air felt electric. "I demand to be rebooked in first class on the next flight as compensation for your staff's actions," she stated. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. I will not be silenced when I'm being discriminated against." That was when Richard made the decision that would ruin his company. He signaled to security. 2 guards approached, the taller one grabbing her arm with unnecessary force. "Ma'am, you need to come with us. Take your hands off me. I've done nothing wrong." The guard's grip tightened, yanking her back. Her balance faltered, her phone and documents scattering across the floor. As she bent to collect them, she saw him, Bradley Winters, Sky Globe CEO, watching from a short distance away, his satisfaction unmistakable. Then she heard it, the words he would one day regret. "Some people just don't know their place." Her phone rang. That custom ringtone. Marcus Chin, her chief strategy officer. The call she couldn't ignore. "I need to take this," she told the guards, her tone leaving no room for debate. She stepped slightly aside, eyes locked on them to make sure they didn't try to move her again. "Marcus," she answered, slipping instantly into business mode. "The Singapore Sovereign Fund needs our decision by tomorrow morning," Marcus said urgently. "They need to know which airline we're recommending for the global corporate contract before they finalize the acquisition paperwork." And there it was, the first revelation that shifted the entire landscape. Nexus Technologies, Elise's company, wasn't just an airline client. They were conducting the final evaluation for a $3.7 billion, 5-year global travel contract. Whoever won it would become the exclusive carrier for more than 40 multinational corporations in the Nexus partner network. Sky Globe had been on the short list. Until now. Elise's first-class ticket today had been the final test of their international premium service. A test they had just failed with spectacular, almost artless incompetence. "I've seen enough," she said quietly, her eyes locked on Bradley Winters across the terminal as if her gaze could carry the words to him. "Remove Sky Globe from consideration. Draft the recommendation for Singapore Airlines instead." Marcus didn't miss a beat, but his tone sharpened. "Elise, there's another problem. The market's jittery about our stake in Sky Globe. Rumors say we might be divesting." And then the second bombshell. Through her private investment firm, Elise Washington controlled 28% of Sky Globe stock, the single largest block of shares, even bigger than the Winters families. Most of the gawking passengers had no idea that the woman they were watching could wipe billions off the airline's value with a single sell order. "The Singapore conference isn't just about our recommendation," Marcus pressed. "Everyone's expecting your keynote to greenlight the Aerosphere acquisition talks." The third revelation dropped into place. This wasn't just about a $500 million investment. It was about securing Nexus Technologies' acquisition of Sky Globe's biggest Asian competitor, a move that would reshape the aviation market for decades. The 2 security guards shifted uneasily now, glancing between each other and their radios. This was no longer just an unruly passenger incident. It was a live corporate grenade. Elise's mind shifted gears instantly, calm, precise, lethal. "Marcus, contact legal. Activate our voting shares. Emergency Sky Globe board meeting today, not tomorrow." citing shareholder concern over discriminatory practices and possible civil rights violations. And Marcus. Yes. Execute Plan Delta. Plan Delta wasn't for show. She had built it years ago for moments exactly like this, when an attack on her dignity crossed into her business interests. She hung up and started firing off rapid 30-second calls, CFO, legal counsel, head of PR, each call triggering a different moving part of the same machine. The guards lingered, but their posture had shifted. One kept watching her with faint recognition, as though her face was hovering just outside his memory. Across the terminal, Winters was now in a heated exchange with Richard Bronson, jabbing a finger toward Elise while speaking to an airport police officer. His voice carried. She's disruptive and threatening our staff. I want her escorted out of the terminal now. A few passengers took his side, emboldened. Get her out of here. Some people don't know how to behave in public. And then the one that froze the air. Go fly with your own kind. The naked racism silenced even some of the murmuring onlookers. Others turned away, ashamed. The police officer approached, and hesitated. His eyes widened. Miss Washington? He asked, keeping his voice low. Yes, she said. From Nexus Technologies? He glanced at her like someone suddenly realizing they'd been standing next to a loaded thunderbolt. You were just on the cover of Business Weekly. My daughter did her school report on you last month. She wants to be a software engineer because of you. For the first time that day, Elise felt a flicker of warmth. Someone here saw her for what she truly was, not through the warped lens of bias. Officer James Taylor moved subtly, placing himself between Elise and the passengers who had turned hostile. It wasn't obvious, but the shift was deliberate. He had made a decision about whose safety mattered most. And then it began. Across the terminal, the electronic departure boards glitched, flickered, went black. Screens tuned to CNN Airport Network in the gate area stuttered, then returned, this time with a red banner. Breaking news. The financial ticker at the bottom of the airport TV screens told the story before anyone said a word. Breaking, SkyGlobe Airlines shares plunge amid rumors of major shareholder sell-off. Travelers began to murmur, fingers darting toward their phones to check investment apps. The air in Terminal B shifted. The personal confrontation was now overshadowed by a corporate freefall. On screen, financial analysts were already speculating. One mentioned unconfirmed reports of discriminatory incidents and the potential for serious civil rights exposure that could trigger legal and investor fallout. Marcus Chin had executed Plan Delta to perfection. Bradley Winters' phone rang, then rang again, and again. He answered, his voice sharp, but as he listened, the color drained from his face. His shoulders hunched, his tone softened, and the swagger evaporated. Across the terminal, other SkyGlobe executives fielded similar calls. A visible ripple of panic moved through the staff, hushed voices, quick glances, nervous pacing. Then the terminal doors swung open. A woman in her 30s strode in, confident, efficient, unflinching. Samantha Rivera, Elise's executive assistant, was flanked by 4 Nexus Technologies attorneys in tailored suits and measured steps. They carried slim leather portfolios, but their expressions carried more weight than any legal document. Samantha went straight to Elise. The documents you requested, she said, passing her the portfolio. Board members are assembling via video conference in 30 minutes. Inside were SkyGlobe's own non-discrimination policies, the rope they'd unknowingly handed her to pull tight. Elise nodded, straightened her jacket and turned, not toward the exit but toward gate 37B, where it had all begun. The legal team closed in beside her like an honor guard. Officer Taylor didn't move to block her. The security guards exchanged uncertain looks, their radios strangely silent now that SkyGlobe's chain of command had fractured. Passengers moved aside. Some whispered. Some filmed. Some simply stared, sensing they were watching history unfold in real time. The PA system crackled. Attention all passengers. Due to an administrative action, all SkyGlobe Airlines flights are temporarily grounded. Please stand by for further information. We apologize for any inconvenience. The message repeated in Spanish, then Mandarin, then French. Confusion gave way to outrage. Gate agents were besieged by furious customers. Bradley Winters, still on the phone, looked up at the announcement with naked horror. It had clicked. The woman his staff had humiliated wasn't just another passenger, she was the financial earthquake swallowing his airline whole. But in chaos, someone always looks for a target. Meredith, the gate agent from earlier, found hers. If you hadn't disrupted our boarding procedures, none of this would be happening, she announced loudly enough for the nearest crowd to hear. Richard Bronson joined in. This woman has caused a major disruption because she couldn't follow simple instructions. It worked, for a moment. Faces in the crowd hardened. Is she the reason our flights are canceled? One person shouldn't be able to ruin it for hundreds of us. The knot of people pressed closer. Officer Taylor stepped in, tension in his jaw. And then Elise moved. She walked to a row of seats, stepped onto a chair with calm precision, and let the noise fall into a tense, waiting hush. My name, she said, her voice carrying like a conductor's baton cutting the air, is Elise Washington. Washington, she began, her voice calm but cutting through the noise like a bell. I am the CEO of Nexus Technologies, and the founder of Horizon Capital. The simple act of stating her name and rank, of refusing to be erased, shifted the room's gravity. Phones came out. Screens lit up. Fingers flew across glass as strangers confirmed what their ears already suspected. Eyes widened. Whispers grew. I came to this airport as a paying customer with a valid first-class ticket. Just like many of you. I was denied boarding, not because of anything I did wrong, but because of what I look like. The hush deepened. Even those who had glared at her minutes earlier were now listening, drawn by her unflinching presence. This is not unique. It happens every day to people who look like me. The difference is, today it happened to someone with the power to demand accountability. At that moment, Bradley Winters burst into the gate area, flushed from running. He froze. Elise Washington, standing above the crowd, commanding the room, was now his problem. A Sky Globe executive leaned in, whispering quickly. Bradley's face moved from irritation to shock, to something dangerously close to fear. Then the cameras arrived. Local news crews, tipped off in advance, pushed their way through the throng. Reporters raised microphones. Lenses focused. Bradley moved to block them. This is a private matter concerning Sky Globe Airlines. No media is permitted. Officer Taylor stepped in, his voice clipped. This is a public terminal, sir. They're allowed to film as long as they don't interfere with security. The cameras instantly swung toward them, catching Bradley's frustration in full view. Elise kept speaking, now fully aware she was addressing far more than the terminal. Today, Sky Globe Airlines showed its true colors. Not just to me but to all of you. And now to the world. What you may not know is that through my investment firm Horizon Capital, I own 28% of Sky Globe stock. I am the largest shareholder in this company. Gasp. Murmurs. People shifted uncomfortably. Bradley shouldered through the crowd, past the phones, past the flashes. Miss Washington, he began too loudly for it to be genuine. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. On behalf of Sky Globe Airlines, I want to personally apologize for any inconvenience you've. This isn't about inconvenience, Mr. Winters, Elise cut in. This is about systemic discrimination. The kind embedded in your corporate culture, the kind you have fostered. His smile stiffened. We have strict non-discrimination policies. That exist on paper, not in practice. She nodded to Samantha, who handed her a tablet. For the past 6 months, my team has been documenting incidents on Sky Globe flights and at Sky Globe facilities. The terminal seemed to lean closer as Elise swiped. The tablet screen showed dates, times, photos, sworn statements. We sent trained mystery passengers, different races, religions, backgrounds, with identical tickets and itineraries. The disparities in treatment weren't just disturbing. They're legally actionable. Bradley's face drained of color. The cameras caught every twitch. He tried again, softer now. Perhaps we could discuss this privately. We can offer you our corporate jet to Singapore and discuss compensation. Today wasn't unfortunate, Mr. Winters, she said, her voice steady. It was inevitable. When you build a corporate culture on exclusion instead of inclusion, when you dismiss diversity as a PR stunt, when you tell colleagues that some people don't know their place. His eyes widened, the exact words he'd once said in a closed meeting. Yes, I heard it, Elise added. And more importantly, I've been listening to your passengers, your employees, the communities you claim to serve. From the crowd, a middle-aged black woman stepped forward, voice shaking. I've flown Sky Globe for 15 years. I get randomly selected for extra screening every single time. An elderly Asian man joined her. They made me change seats last month because a white passenger didn't want to sit next to me. The flight attendant said it was to make everyone comfortable. One by one, more passengers stepped forward, each with a story. Each a brick in the wall now closing in on Bradley Winters. And the cameras caught everyone. Those who had hurled slurs minutes earlier began edging toward the exits, faces turned down, hoping anonymity might shield them. But in the age of smartphones there is no anonymity. Videos of their earlier tirades were already flooding Twitter and Instagram, tags blazing their names into the record. Hashtag SkyGlobeReckoning, hashtag Faces of Hate. Elise let the stories flow. Each passenger who spoke was given her full attention, her steady gaze lending weight to accounts that for years had been dismissed as misunderstandings. When the last voice fell silent, she turned, not just to the crowd at Gate 37B, but to the invisible audience watching through 1,000 live streams. Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, she said, her voice carrying. It's bad business. SkyGlobe Airlines has been losing market share for 8 straight quarters because it refuses to acknowledge that the world has changed. Today's travelers expect better. They demand better. And they deserve better. She locked eyes with Bradley Winters. I came here not only as a passenger, but as someone evaluating SkyGlobe for a $3 billion corporate travel contract. I was also considering a full acquisition, folding this airline into Nexus Technologies' transportation division. The blood drained from his face. Those deals were lifelines for a company choking on debt, and he had just severed them with his own culture of exclusion. But based on what I've seen and documented, Elise continued, I cannot recommend SkyGlobe. Not without fundamental change in leadership and culture. Phones chimed across the gate as hashtags exploded. Hashtag SkyGlobeReckoning climbed to the top of global trends. The live streams were pulling in hundreds of thousands of concurrent viewers. Then came the shuffle of expensive shoes on tile. 3 SkyGlobe board members, suits crisp, expressions strained, pushed through the crowd. They had seen the trending feed. They knew this was no longer a PR problem. It was a survival crisis. Ms. Washington, said the lead director, voice tight, we take your concerns extremely seriously. We would like to convene an emergency board meeting now. That's exactly what I called for an hour ago, Elise replied. Security cleared a premium lounge for privacy. Inside the air was cool, the lighting muted, but tension rolled off every person in the room. Screens on the wall flickered to life as remote board members joined via video. Elise and her legal team began their presentation. The evidence was surgical in its precision. Emails from Bradley dismissing diversity complaints as overreactions. Internal memos suggesting reseating strategies to accommodate certain passengers' prejudices. Statistics revealing patterns that could not be explained away. Testimony from former employees describing direct orders to treat passengers differently based on race or religion. With each slide, Bradley's breathing grew heavier. He tugged at his collar, his skin blotching crimson. Beads of sweat traced down his temple. Halfway through, as Elise outlined how discrimination had cost SkyGlobe 3 major corporate accounts in the last year, Bradley's hand flew to his chest. I can't, he gasped before slumping sideways. The room jolted into chaos. Is there a doctor? Someone shouted. Call an ambulance, Elise ordered sharply. She was already at his side, loosening his tie, lowering him into the recovery position. It was a striking tableau, the woman whose dignity he had trampled now ensuring his safety. Compassion where there could have been only vengeance. Paramedics arrived in minutes. It wasn't a heart attack, but a severe panic episode triggered by extreme stress. As they wheeled him out, he looked at Elise with something almost like disbelief. With Bradley gone, the board reconvened. They moved faster now, survival instinct overcoming corporate caution. After less than half an hour, the chairman delivered the verdict. Effective immediately, Bradley Winters was suspended pending investigation. An interim CEO, from outside SkyGlobe's current leadership, would be appointed. An independent committee would launch a top-to-bottom review of the airline's practices, armed with the full dossier Elise's team had assembled. The chairman faced her. Ms. Washington, we can't undo what happened to you or to the countless others. But we can ensure it never happens again. Outside the lounge, the hashtags kept climbing. Inside, the power balance of SkyGlobe had shifted, permanently. I would welcome your guidance in this process of transformation, the board chair said. Elise's reply was calm but edged with steel. Real change requires more than apologies and committees. It means a shift in culture, from the top down. I'll be watching closely to see if SkyGlobe is truly committed to that shift. When she and her team stepped back into the terminal, the air felt different. The undercurrent of hostility that had met her earlier was gone. In its place was something warmer, almost reverent. Passengers approached to shake her hand. Airport staff, some who had kept their eyes down before, now nodded as she passed. Cameras tracked every step, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would live in corporate history. The confrontation at Gate 37B, it turned out, had been the spark. What followed would be a fire that scorched not only Sky Globe Airlines, but the industry itself. 1 week later, the grand ballroom of a Manhattan hotel overflowed with reporters. The Sky Globe logo loomed above the podium, stripped of its old glamour, now a brand in disgrace. Dr. Janet Rivera, the interim board chair, stepped forward. Her presence was history in itself, the first Latina to hold such a position in a major U.S. airline. She scanned the packed room, then spoke. After careful consideration and based on preliminary findings from our internal audit, the board has made the difficult but necessary decision to suspend all Sky Globe operations, effective immediately. The words hit like a shockwave. In the 98-year history of commercial aviation, no airline of Sky Globe's size had ever voluntarily grounded its entire fleet outside a national emergency. 250 aircraft would be parked. Over 21,000 employees placed on paid leave during what was called a comprehensive restructuring. The cost? $35 million per day. But Rivera's voice was steady. Some have asked why such a drastic measure is necessary, she said. Sometimes you have to tear down the foundation to rebuild properly. Sky Globe's issues aren't cosmetic. They are structural, embedded in the company's culture from its highest levels down to its daily operations. The cameras panned across the board members, their faces solemn. Many had fought against grounding the airline, but the audit had left no room for illusions. In the week since the LaGuardia incident, Sky Globe terminals had turned into ghost towns. Ticket counters stood abandoned, kiosks flashing temporarily unavailable. At JFK, a time-lapse camera caught the slow procession of jets being towed to remote stands, engines wrapped, their once proud livery looking suddenly like museum pieces. Rivera's final words echoed in the hushed ballroom. Sky Globe will remain grounded until we have new leadership, new policies, and cultural safeguards to ensure every passenger and employee is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of race, gender, religion, or background. What no one expected was the wave of public confession that followed. Meredith Thompson, the gate agent who had denied Elise boarding, sat down for a CNN interview, her eyes rimmed red. "I've worked at Sky Globe for 10 years, she said, and I never once questioned the patterns I was part of. We were trained to pay extra attention to certain passengers. It was never called racial profiling, but that's exactly what it was." Her voice cracked. "I didn't think about the human cost until that day at Gate 37B. Her words joined thousands of others, employees, passengers, even former executives, who now saw their own complicity reflected in the viral footage. Sky Globe had been grounded, but something deeper had been set in motion. The profiling, Meredith later admitted, was never written in black and white. It was coded, framed in the language of security concerns or passenger comfort. She had swallowed it for years, never challenging the euphemisms that masked prejudice. But after the confrontation, something shifted. Meredith volunteered for an employee task force working alongside the independent auditors, determined to unearth and dismantle the very practices she once carried out. "I can't change what I did," she told a reporter, "but I can help make sure it never happens again." Meanwhile, at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Bradley Winters was recovering. Doctors called it a stress-induced cardiovascular episode, but to those who had watched his empire collapse in real time, it looked like the physical toll of decades of unchecked arrogance meeting a wall it couldn't break through. Television footage showed him in his hospital bed, watching Dr. Janet Rivera's press conference announcing the airline's suspension. At first, disbelief clouded his face. Then, slowly, his expression softened into something harder to define. A flicker of recognition, maybe even understanding. According to sources close to him, Bradley had been unusually quiet during recovery. No public statements. No legal counterattacks. No spin. One nurse claimed to have overheard him murmur, "She was right." Whether he meant Elise Washington or someone from deeper in his past, no one could say. 2 weeks into the shutdown, the independent auditors released their preliminary findings, and they were worse than anyone had anticipated. The report's conclusions didn't just scorch Sky Globe's reputation, they set fire to the entire industry's comfort zone. Within days, rival airlines scrambled to act. United Airlines announced a sweeping review of its customer service policies. Delta established an independent oversight committee for discrimination complaints. American Airlines rolled out mandatory anti-bias training for all staff. "What we're seeing," explained aviation analyst Maria Chen on CNN, "is an unprecedented moment of self-examination across the entire airline industry. The Sky Globe incident forced every carrier to confront patterns they've ignored or denied for decades. 3 months after the LaGuardia confrontation, the shift was unmistakable. The U.S. Department of Transportation issued new regulations requiring airlines to track and publish data on passenger treatment by race, gender, and other demographics. Industry associations created certification programs for equity in customer service. Even insurers began offering reduced premiums to carriers with strong anti-discrimination safeguards. And at LaGuardia's Gate 37B, the scene of the spark, a renovation was underway. The old Sky Globe branding was gone. In its place, a blue-wrapped sign teased, "Coming soon, a new way to fly." Behind the temporary walls, workers installed a redesigned gate area with wheelchair-friendly layouts, multi-faith prayer rooms, multilingual signage, and walls adorned with culturally inclusive art. 6 months after grounding itself, Sky Globe returned to the skies. Its first flight, from New York to Singapore, was chosen for symbolism, connecting two of the world's most diverse cities. At the controls was Captain Diane Rodriguez, the airline's first Latina chief pilot. In the cabin, lead flight attendant Michael Chen welcomed passengers. Years earlier, Chen had filed a discrimination lawsuit against Sky Globe. Now, under new leadership, he had chosen to return. Bradley Winters never came back to aviation. Instead, reports surfaced of him volunteering with organizations dedicated to creating economic opportunities for minority youth. A surprising final chapter for a man whose career had once been defined by exclusion rather than inclusion. The industry itself would never fully return to its old ways. Policies changed. Cultures shifted. Doors opened that had long been closed. And it had all begun because one woman, standing at Gate 37B, refused to accept being denied her rightful seat.